already had church, but we're going to do a little bit more along those lines. You've already had a chance to hear from Gregg. But I want to say that Gregg has been with us since Friday morning, and he has filled every half hour of his days with some 12 hours during the day. Every half hour has been a new conversation with different people. He spent an enormous amount of time talking, listening, and learning. And Gregg, one of the things that I think is a great gift about what Convergence does is just this gift of listening and hearing from all of us. So I want you to know how grateful we are for your listening and for your pastoral presence with us. And we are really, really, again, pleased and honored to have you here. And we're looking forward to the insights you may have to deliver to us today. So, Gregg, thank you for all of what you've been doing.
Welcome, everyone. And there's some seats up front. If you're just coming in late, please, there's seats up front. They're bringing some other chairs in the back. Yes. So, as I mentioned this morning, some of you are aware, we did a survey of the congregation. We had 240 people participate in the survey, which is among the best participation we've had at any church in recent times. People want to give their opinions, and this is a great way to do it. I hope you found the survey helpful in that process. I want to give to you today the results of the survey. It's not going to have all, if you came today looking for all the answers to what we're going to do next, you're not going to hear them. Today's presentation is about what you all said, and that's what we're going to talk about. The pieces that will be added to this are threefold. One, there will be a final assessment report that will be given to the church, probably in the next month or 6 weeks. It will include all of the demographic data that we've gathered and analyzed about your area. That's not included in this report today. It will include all of my observations and notes that I took from the 23 interviews that I've done while I've been here and watching and observing your service and all of those things. So that will be included. And then we will, in that process, give some of our best recommendations of some steps forward, which your task force and I will be working on as we move forward over the next 12 months. And as I mentioned in the service this morning, that will include several times when we will ask the congregation to come together and talk about things. Whether it's talking about what we could let go of, what our new vision might be, what are some of the partnerships that we see as we move forward. So that's going to be important times for you all to have a part of that, because this, to move forward with a new strategic plan requires, we find in any congregation, about 60% of the congregation has to say yes to this. This is where we are going. Not simply yes, but actually owning where it's going, because otherwise it doesn't get implemented. And the last thing I ever want to see happen is to help a church write a strategic plan, put it on a shelf, and nothing happens. So be aware of that. Okay? So let's get started. So by the numbers, based upon the surveys that we did, and also there was a survey that was filled out by the leadership of the church, you have on average about 960 individuals that participate or support in some way. Now, you may not see them all at one time. Some of them help out during weekly activities as well as weekend, but that is that number of people who are impacting in this ministry. You're averaging about 200 in worship face-to-face over the last 9 months. What you see on that chart is, prior to COVID, you're higher than you were then. During COVID, of course, every church, I talked about D-Day this morning. COVID will probably be the D-Day of the 21st century because of the impact. There's a seat right down front here. There you go. And so coming out of COVID, it's been interesting to watch, people say, well, the older generation has come back to church. They have. Whatever you braved through when you saw, some of you who grew up during, my father grew up during the Depression and saw World War II, you braved it back. But the younger generation has been a little more cautious coming back. And we're starting to really see that happening. That in some congregations we're seeing those younger generations starting to come back a bit again, which I think is good to see. especially those that have children, and I'll just say this, I'll probably get to it elsewhere, but I'll say it now because I started thinking about it. Congregations that are investing in young people are seeing young people. Congregations that say, we don't have any young people, so we're not going to invest in young people, don't have young people. The little church in Chattanooga that my wife and I attend, and I'm going to introduce her before I get done here, I should have done that first. When we started there in 2022, we moved to Chattanooga from Atlanta. On some Sundays we had one, some Sundays we had 3 kids in church. And about a year ago, we got this idea that we ought to hire someone to really manage children. And some people were saying, we can't afford it, we don't have any kids. The last 3 months, on any given Sunday, we have 14 or 15 kids, okay? And it's because the church said, we're going to invest in that. And I just believe if you invest in something, it grows. So that's just my point today. So you can see all the different activities you have going. As I mentioned, this church is so not busy. Of the people who took the survey, note that we had 240 took the survey. Not every question was answered by all 240 people. But the majority, over 60% of you, have been here more than 10 years. I didn't ask how many of you have been here more than 40 years or 60 years. Oh, sorry for that bump it. There you go. Good. There you go. Thank you. There you are. So the most responsive have been here more than 10 years. But the good news is there are still people coming every year. There are people who've been here less than 3 years, less than 1 year. The goal would be, how do we start to get that number going forward? I want to just say, I shared this with your staff Friday morning. Why do we want to have a new person come into our church? If a new person comes into your church and they feel welcome and they feel safe and they feel like it's a place they want to be, they are more likely in the first year to 2 years of them coming to your church to bring an additional 5 people to visit. Because they have family, they have friends, they'll bring them. Once they've been here 2 or 3 years, they don't know anybody outside the church anymore, are they? So they don't have anybody to invite. So once you've been there more than 10 years, you need to go away so we can get more in. So it's important that we welcome newcomers. We have to be very intentional, not overwhelm them, but make sure that we have a plan of how they become involved in the congregation, how they make friends. I appreciate what your pastor is doing of having the bowl where you pick up, you put your address in it, you take someone's out and you begin that process of getting to know people. Because that's crucial. We say one of the biggest reasons why somebody stays in a church is they've made a friend and they found a ministry to do. So those are crucial things that happen. So it's important for that. You have 14 people that began participation in 2023. You're about to have a new members class coming up here soon. Those are crucial things to be focusing on. How often do you attend your congregation's gatherings? And this is important to understand, because I know some people say, I don't see people as often as I used to. In general, across every church, when I was growing up, and maybe some of you were, I grew up in kind of an evangelical household. We went to church Sunday school, Sunday morning worship, Sunday night worship, Wednesday night prayer meeting, Friday night youth group. We were in church all the time. And if you went away on vacation, you had to bring back a bulletin that proved you went to church somewhere else. Okay, that's not the case today. Okay, people are coming to church less frequently. They still feel like they're very active and very part of their church. They may be involved in what's happening during the week, but they may only show up for worship once a month. They may watch worship online. So it's a different world. And it's not that they're less spiritual, or it's not that they're less thinking of their church. There's so many things else going on between families and work and all the things that happen. So be aware that that's something that's happening. A lot of your people, because of COVID, participated both face-to-face and online. And I will say this, for congregations that have invested well in the equipment needed to do online and have a plan for that, It's a growing feature of their congregations. I have on my team at Convergence, Reverend Jim Key. Reverend Jim Key works for us half-time as our Director of Online Innovation. The other half-time of his work is he lives in Michigan, but he is Riverside Church's digital minister. Okay? They have employed him half-time to be able to create all kinds, not just the worship service online, but ways people can interact together in online forums and that activities. And he provides all kinds of that information through our website. And when we move forward, this he'll be somebody we can bring in to talk about some things that help the church be more savvy online. Okay? That's part of that process. Age-wise, and I talked about this morning, you're a boomer church. That's 66 to 80, maybe a little bit that silent generation, but you've really got a lot of people in that generation. That means two things. One thing that comes out of that is sometimes younger people don't take surveys. And so we may need to look and see if there are some younger folks that we ought to do some focus groups with here in the church to understand more what they need and how this goes forward. But you still have a lot of people who are in the Generation X, and some people who are in Generation Y. So there's there, but not as many, and some of you aren't concerned about that. I'm sorry, you're a white church. You're a white community. I mean, I think when we see the demographics, we're going to see that. I know that we want diversity. I mean, every good UCC church would love to be fully diverse. It's the challenge of this community. So, yeah. You're a very educated church. Many of you know that. You've gone to college, you've gone to graduate school. Does your household contain children, in other words, under 18, or does it contain adults over 65? Not surprising, okay? Not surprising. Again, that may not fully reflect your congregation because, again, some of those younger people may not have taken the survey. I just want to make you aware of that. You are an open and affirming congregation, but you really do not have diversity even in those of sexual orientation. That's an area that may be a place to look for additional challenges for you all. Male, female, not surprising, there are more women than men, especially when you're an older congregation. What happens to us guys? We die. We also don't take surveys very well either, so this is an important piece for you all to hear. My pastor, Catherine Howe Toledano, is from Chester, Connecticut. She went to Yale with your pastor, Laura. She said to me as I was coming out here, she said, I don't know what you're going to do with them because every church, every town in New England has a UCC church. And so why would anyone go beyond their town lines to come to this church? Well, you all come from everywhere. This is not a parish church. This is a regional church. Okay? Really keep that in mind. One of the things that regional churches, I was in the evangelical church when I first started the ministry. What regional churches do in the evangelical world is they create small groups or gatherings in each of the communities where people come from to build out those regional areas because people don't drive to church. If you only come on Sunday morning, you're only getting a little bit of the church where you can build community and develop friendships and connection oftentimes happens in your own town. So it'd be great to figure out ways that the people who are old-limers who live in this town or that town would get to know each other more so that they would begin to build this little additional satellite community of old-limers. You're a very diverse church in terms of income. Probably reflects some of the senior giving, seniors who may not have as much retirement income as others have, but you're very, you're rather diverse. You mostly hear about the church on email, although I love the fact that the third highest number is talking to others. Hopefully, you don't have a parking lot, which helps. Some churches parking lot conversations work, but you have street conversations, I guess. But word of mouth, the one thing that people always say, why should we invest more money in our website and our Facebook page and our social media when we don't ever pay attention to it? We're not doing it for you. We're doing it for people outside to learn about you. So that's why your website and your Facebook and your other social media needs to reflect who you are so people can find you and say, that's my tribe. Those are people who I want to be part of. Do you think your congregation is growing, shrinking, or staying about the same? A lot of people said to me our congregation is shrinking. And they're looking back at those great years before 1990. Every congregation had those years. We are in a whole different culture today than we were then, and those days are never coming back. The churches that are well designed for 1965 to come back again, they're never coming back, okay? We have to be prepared for what's coming in the 2027, 2030, 2040. What does that mean? The thing that's really interesting is, this people who said you were shrinking, and I showed you that slide that said you had more people coming to worship now than you had in 2018. So, yes, maybe the number of members are shrinking, but I heard your pastor say, but what does membership mean today? I mean, for a lot of younger people, what's membership mean? I don't join a political party, I don't join a social organization, I just am. So, you know, that's how we measure try to change. Yeah, this was looking, we looked briefly at your community because Anna didn't really think about how far out you go, but just in looking at Old Line, there's about 10,000 residents in this town. They have a median household income of $122,000 per year, which is higher than the average in Connecticut. 55% of your residents have bachelor's degrees. 60% are employed. So you have a high unemployment rate? No, they're retired. The median age is 49 years old, which is older than Connecticut as a whole. The median value of your homes, as people measured it probably a couple of years ago, was $500,000. And I would guess someone would say, I don't know of a house for sale for $500,000 in your town. Because real estate prices have just gone everywhere. It's a popular place. I said this to someone, well, what happens as we get older? Well, I've been to towns in Illinois and Missouri and Indiana, and when someone dies, the house sits empty and eventually falls down. Why? Because the schools are empty, and because the factories are no longer there, and the towns are dying. I guarantee you, you have a house here, you die, somebody moves in the next week, okay? There's a great demand to live here. It's a great place to be. So you don't have to worry about the fact that you're going to get fewer people here. The thing that's often said too is, well, we want more young families. Well, yes, that's good to have. But do you want young families because you want them to do more work in the church? Do you want young families because they're going to give more money to the church? Let me just say this. Young families don't have any time. They need you to help them. So if you want young families, you're going to have to minister to young families. That's why you need to invest in children's programs and various things, because they need your help. The older people who are moving here, who are in their 60s, who are just retired, they're looking for something to do. They're looking for community. They're looking, and let me say, people are healthier and lasting longer. It used to be, you turn 65, I mean, my grandfather talked about this. They gave you Social Security because they thought you'd die in 5 years, okay? Now, you know, we're living in our 90s active. I was saying about the Veterans of the Greatest War. I was watching a hockey game. I'm a big Buffalo Sabres fan, by the way. I was watching a hockey game, and they were honoring the veterans. This guy's 100 years old. He's a veteran of Normandy. He marches out onto the ice, stands a salute, marches back. I'm thinking, I can't do that, you know? So we're living longer. So those active seniors are crucial to any congregation, and you have an opportunity to get more of them coming in. I'll just say that. Church engagement. Your respondents are volunteering. We probably only have a limited number here, but here's what we found. I think it's important to look at money. I mean, we all talk about money. But to me, one of the things that's not measured in almost any congregation is the hours of volunteers that people give. Your people, from the survey, just from the survey, acknowledge that they gave 9,000 hours of volunteering in the church last year. 9,000 hours. Put that towards $20 an hour. Think of what that's worth. Okay? And then if you add in the white elephant sale, which I think is where that 150,000 hours comes in, because you engage with people who aren't even in this church to help with that process. And so that's a big thing. What are the strengths of the congregation? What do people say? People, the strengths are all of you. The greatest strength of any congregation, in my opinion, is the people, and you acknowledge that. The sermon, you have a pulpiteer of rare skill here, and all your team is tremendous. I mean, it's just great. Your ministers, that's what is your strength. When people say, well, how do we deal with the fact we have a deficit? Well, let me say, the way you solve deficits is not by cutting, it's by expanding. So we have to figure out how we're going to expand the income, expand the way that's going. I'll just be honest with you. Because I've watched the bean counters take charge of any company, any organization, and it's a sign of things going down, not going up. So we've got to figure out how to engage this great ministry that you have going forward. So what are the dreams that some of you had? Making an impact in the world and in individual lives. 36 responses. Building social justice. Deepening spiritual lives. Engaging younger people. Deepening connections between participants. Growing more diverse. I want to say something, though, that is a little bit of a challenge that we found from the survey. There were about 30 to 40 people who took the survey who acknowledged they haven't been in church in 6 months. Of that number, about 20 of them said they want the church to do less social justice. Okay? These are people who aren't here, but still call this their church. I want to say, so there's a need probably for conversation. There's a need for how does this church, as we move forward, how do we get our values in alignment with everyone? How do we make sure we're on the right track with it? And make sure we understand each other. We are fed like out of a fire hose from the media, all kinds of different positions, and depending on where you're standing when the fire hose hits you, you hear certain things. This is a place, we are an open and affirming congregation, so that means we have to be willing to listen and talk to each other, okay? And find ways to move forward together into solving, because the problems of the world aren't going away. How do we fix them? Yeah. So the concerns that you expressed, this is the biggest curse word in Christianity, change. Yes, change is coming. I'm sorry, it's reality. We have to figure out how to change. What one generation's vision, how does that translate to the vision of the next generation? How do we find the common ground? How do we move forward? That's going to be critical. Aging was a response that many of you said, probably those who were getting older. Polarization, what I just talked about, the fact that we may have to work on getting more in the line. Finances, that's something, unfortunately, when churches come together, what's the thing they often look at most is the balance sheet or the budget sheet. We need to look at, you need to celebrate more of the fact that you had 9,000 hours of volunteer time given to the church. I mean, that's part of the joy. Resistance to change, again. We've got to realize, we've got to work on our change. You have a beautiful sanctuary, it dates back, I know all the history and all these things, and great service, but there's things that change. Having the children doing the children's sermon is a sign of change. Good, work those change muscles. Some say there's lower participation of members. Well, again, it may relate both to aging, and it may relate to some of this alignment that was talked about. Generations. A key concern among your folks is the aging of your congregation. Your current members will age, that's a fact, yet you wish for more young participants. This is my my colleague said, yeah, why are you wanting them? If you're wanting to invest in them and help them to help their lives better, great. If you're wanting them just to fill the empty seats on your board, forget it. Okay, older congregations are vital. They really are. I see in this church, some of the people I talked to this weekend have only been here a few years, and they're excited about being able to get involved in things because they moved here, and this became a place where they found community. Okay? And some of you have been here a long time, and you're like, I've been doing it. One thing I mentioned this morning is we might have to have some white elephant sale here of some things. You're living on a vision that's been here a long time, and we did a lot of good things, but there may be time for a new vision. Your pastor has now been here a few years. He and you and the team will need to create what is the vision we're moving forward with, and then you all kind of contribute to that and make that happen. That's going to be important as you move forward. I'll just say this. 53 people said that there had been conflicts or disagreements in the last couple of years. This kind of ties into this idea. We need to have conversations to figure out. One of the things that my organization does is we, in addition to other work that we've already engaged with you in, we do healthy communication workshops. Because here's what I find. We've stopped learning how to talk to each other if we have differences in healthy ways. Because we don't observe that in the culture. We don't observe healthy conversation between people with differences in the culture. But the church needs to be a place where we can engage with each other in healthy ways. And so we do healthy communication workshops. If we find that there are disagreements that can't be dealt with that way, then we further go on and do mediation if that's necessary. But yes, that is a crucial piece of what I think the future needs to be. And we often don't say this until we see this happening in our congregation. How often have you donated financially to the congregation last year? 236 people answered the question. Only a few said never. Some have said that they have stopped giving because they haven't been coming, but they might give again. How would you describe your congregation's financial health? 68% described your church finances as tight or difficult. Only 29% would have described them as tight or difficult 5 years ago. That is the case everywhere. Let me just tell you that. You're not alone. But you have some really important, one of the things that I'm just talking to your leaders, I believe this. I was trained by someone when I was an executive pastor in Chicago who had been one of the early leaders of church consulting. His name was Lyle Schaller. He wrote a lot of books. And he said to me, remember this, your congregation has 4 pockets of money. There is that pledge, that annual giving amount that you put into the congregation each year. But then everybody has another front pocket, and that is when the kids come up and they're going to camp and you find out there's 3 kids that don't have enough to go, or somebody's had a house burned down. You reach in your pocket and you give money, because you just give it because it's impulsive giving. When it's said that we need to put a new roof on the building and we may have to do a 3-year plan and do something, you say, yeah, I'll go above my tithe and I'll give you an extra piece, that kind of piece that goes there. Or we're going to build a new wing for something, or we're going to do this or that. You do that. But the 4th piece is legacy. All of you are going to someday not be here. I'm not going to be here. You're not going to be here. But the wealth that we have accumulated over our lifetimes, in some cases, we want to make sure our kids, our grandkids are cared for. But for many of us, there's even wealth beyond that we know that is there, that we could leave for the church that we love and put a place in there. Because what's happening is, right now, the baby boom generation and the silent generation controls about 70 to 80% of the wealth of the United States. Those XYZers coming up, they haven't inherited from you yet because you haven't died. So that will come, but they're right now facing serious financial challenges. It probably is what reflected in this last election, to be quite honest, is that they don't feel that the stock market going up helped them. They saw the price of eggs go up, okay? Or the price of gas went up. So we have to figure out how to provide space for that next generation to be able to financially carry the balance of this ministry forward. And that's going to come by leaving a legacy. And I know that at one time, we were talking to some people, 10, 15 years ago, you all had something called the Spire Society, and a lot of people signed up for it. And your endowment went from $600,000 to $3 million in that time. Not because you started killing off people, no. But because those people made that commitment. Now may be the time to reignite that. And it may not happen instantly, but there's a lot of things happening in the tax laws that you may be aware of or not aware of. Some of you who are now in your 80s or 70s and 80s are realizing that some of that IRAs and different things we accumulated, they're going to tax us for it as we take it out. But I can give donor direction and go right to the church, and I don't pay any taxes on it. The church gets the money. It's one of the few ways you can actually give charitably these days and make a difference. So I encourage your stewardship team to be thinking beyond just that money that goes in the plate, to realize there's other sources. You may have other assets that are not functioning as they could, that could be addressed. That's some of the things we'll be working on. So again, I believe it's going to be about finding greater space than worrying about what's less. Change skills. So I do think that it's important that change skills get built. That's one of the things we're going to work with you on, help you figure out some ways to do some change skills. I'm going to give you all these slides. I'm not going to read them all because I don't want to keep you too long. I promised you 3 hours, but I don't think we want to go that long. Participation. A final concern of your response is your current number of members and active participation. So here's what I would say to you. It's about whether, it may be that some people are less participatory. And so you're seeing some committees or some things that you just can't find enough people to do the work anymore. That may be a sign that something needs to change. I was executive pastor at a large United Methodist church in Chicago. And when I came there, it was an interesting church. They were in Naperville, Illinois, which was on the very edge of the Chicago metro area in the 1980s, 70s and 80s. Their church was in the middle of a cornfield. Almost all of the members of the church at that time were farmers. They raised their entire mission budget each year, which covered a lot of things, from having an annual pork chop dinner in which the farmers sent in the meat, the corn, the tomatoes, the women fixed it, it was all done, and it was a full, it was no cost involved. All the profit went there. I came in 2005. And the last 2 couples that had led the pork chop dinner had done that and quit the church and left. Because the work it took to put that on. We were feeding 800 people on that day. Great, beautiful, wonderful thing. None of them were really invested in coming to the church. They were it was just a community. It had been a community dinner, it was a community dinner. We didn't have any pork farmers, we didn't have any corn farmers, we didn't have any tomato farmers. We had to buy all that stuff, we had to bring people in to cook it all and boil that corn and put on that dinner, and people were getting so frustrated. The pastor said to me, here's one of your first jobs. You're going to lead the last pork chop dinner. So we did. We pulled the planning team together and said, this is our last time. I know we've been doing this for 40 years, but this is the last pork chop dinner. And we fed everyone, we thanked everyone, we told them it's going to be that. And we all went home happy. Some people said, what would we do if we don't have a pork chop dinner? The next year, I believe it was the next year, and I might have the dates quite so because I know some of you work with Haiti. The next year, Haiti had an earthquake. Our church already had a relationship with an orphanage in Port-au-Prince. And that summer that church just led a Haitian aid fund for the whole city of Naperville. They sent teams down, they brought kids back, they did all kinds of, they invested probably thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in making a difference in Haiti. They would not have been able to do that if they still had to put on that dinner. It's okay that some things go away, because good things come next. Okay? I'll just say that's my sermon on change. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg, for sharing all of those results. I want to simply open it up for questions. If you do have a question, I'm going to bring the mic to you so that everybody can hear you. But are there questions or responses or thoughts?
Not a question, but something very easy to remember. Voltaire, one must change with change or be consumed by change.
Well said.
I have a question. Last night, I decided to review the second seminar about the different things. And I noticed two things. One of the comments that Cameron had made was talked about the intensity of community. And I thought back over my many years and my friends, and the one group that we haven't talked about at all, and maybe it's because we don't need to, but anyway, I had a lot of friends who are Jewish. They have a different, and I wonder, how are they doing? Because when I was a kid, by the way, I'm from a little town in western Pennsylvania that's so red, it's maroon. But there was a large Jewish community. And now I'm an alumni association of my high school, and we formed a foundation, and 6 of the 15 guiding members are Jewish. And it's like, how are they doing?
I can't speak for all of, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I can't speak for all of Judaism.
Wait, turn the switch on.
It is on. It's on. Take it back. Cameron, in particular, our team works with the United Reform Judaism, and she's been working with some synagogues and with their national leadership team over the last several years. They're experiencing the very same things mainline churches are experiencing.
Because they rely tremendously on family. They have a Jewish
Right.
community center.
Right,
and
but
spend-
they're seeing the same thing because there's not willingness to change in some cases, or there are younger Jewish families who are not feeling the same connection that we talked about. So yes, that's happening. In some of their more conservative areas, I think there still is a lot of focus on that, but I do think that, especially among the Reform Judaism, which is probably the more widespread in the United States, they're experiencing some of those things. Yeah. There's a hand over there.
My question kind of follows on Mike's. Where is the migration going? There's got to be migration somewhere. You just don't lose, they didn't walk off the edge of the flat earth.
Speak to which migration you're talking about.
Migration of congregants.
So two things are happening. One is that the XYZ generation, which is still spiritual, has not always found their meaning in typical congregations. Okay? So if you go to yoga centers, if you go to hiking groups, you'll find people who say they find some of their spirituality there. Okay? In some churches that are doing things like dinner church and doing church in the wild and different things, they're experiencing how to reach some of those. Again, it's going to be changing what we do to meet what they need. We can't change them to meet what we have, necessarily. So yes, I also think that, churches that stop, your church, which I really love, your church has put faith into action, okay? You continue to make a difference so many places. There are a lot of churches where they just come to worship and they go home. And people feel like it's not meeting my needs anymore. I appreciate that your pastor is looking at the wider perspective of faith, because I think that simply engaging one thing and doing and singing the same hymn and not engaging. It's why people are leaving, because they're just not finding meaning anymore. Yeah.
It's just a suggestion that one of the sectors of society that we've heard about that was voted for Trump was the young males, unsuccessful, undereducated. And I think, how do we reach out to that group? It certainly exists in our midst, and here we are, older, successful, educated as a group. How do we make a place that is welcoming or invites that younger group?
I'll tell you one thing that is needed, and you've got a lot of really smart people here. When I was a pastor in Atlanta, we had a lot of people, younger families, and even some older people, who were seriously struggling financially, primarily because they were in debt. And I engaged, I don't agree with his politics, but I engaged Dave Ramsey's financial freedom. He has a whole thing that teaches people about how to get out of debt. And I used that material in that church. Even though the church was more progressive, we just ignored the parts that were conservative. Because what we wanted to help people do was do something practical, was to help them get their lives back where they were there. We didn't help them necessarily find a better job, but in some ways you do find a better job. You start getting out of debt, you start getting caught in some web, there's an opportunity for that. So I think we have to find practical steps to help people where they are. And it won't look like what we've done in the past, but there are people here who have skills to offer to help people find that. Yeah.
Forgive us our debts.
I appreciate you discussing the realities of changing spiritual life among different generations. As someone who's in the XYZ generation, I think it would be helpful to hear a little bit more context about some other shifts that have happened, in the sense that it's not the fault of the XYZ generation that the church's numbers are going down in terms of active participation, but it's also not the first time. There's been these, I don't know if you would call it cataclysmic changes, but providing some context for it's happened before.
So if you ever read a UCC history book, there was this time early in the late 1600s, early 1700s, which people were saying, our children aren't coming to church. We made them have covenants because they wouldn't come to church, but they were our kids and we didn't want them to be lost. Well, then the Great Awakening happened and they all came back to church, which was great. But it was mostly the Wesleyans that brought the Great Awakening. But anyways, there are seasons where that happens, yes. There was a season after the First World War, many of you probably, I'm sure many of you remember that, right? Where the devastation, especially in Europe, the devastation of what that was, turned many people away from God. And some of those churches never recovered. Now, we've gone through a lot of traumas happening in our culture, a lot of change. I mean, change is like, boom, it just keeps happening. So we have to be aware of how, maybe one way church is going to help people is to find a way where we don't have to think about change and we can focus on our spirituality. And I'm a big fan of a gentleman, some of you probably read, named Richard Rohr, who he's a Jesuit priest. He's now almost 90 years old, but he formed the Center for Action and Contemplation, and he believes that we really have to go back inward in contemplation and then go outward into action. It has to be, we have to get these kind of things going. I like that a lot.
Okay, why don't we have a couple more, and then I think we probably need to bring it to a close, but Dana.
In the first two sessions with Cameron, I was really struck by a Venn diagram in her first one where we had the sort of social justice and the awe and wonder, and how we do the social justice really well. And the awe and wonder is sometimes not there in sort of the intellectual demands of our congregation, and people, myself included. But I really do believe that those opportunities are also very available elsewhere. And I don't talk to people about my faith. I don't talk to people about moments in life when I have experienced that which is greater than myself in the grocery store or at work. But I can do that here, and I can do that with my friends here and people I know here, and I do experience that. And I think sometimes we're missing the opportunity to go deeper in that sense of awe, which is founded in God. My language would be God. And that's a unique thing, to be able to have the intellectual rigor that we demand here and enjoy, but that added level as well. And so when you put up those numbers about people saying, I wish they had less social justice, and I work in a homeless shelter, so I am deep in it for almost 20 years. But I guess I don't even remember how I answered that, but I might have answered it that way, because I get that all over the place. But I miss the awe and the wonder and the ability to share that part of my life.
Do you want to respond, or do you want to?
I think she did a great statement.
Okay, so is it John or somebody else over here? No. Okay.
I think that, I feel that in addition to bringing us on this process, on this journey of growth, I think we also have to keep in mind logistics and organization. A year ago, there were many of us involved with the LBS, Ladies Benevolent Society, board meeting and the luncheons, and we've been thinking about change, and we tried to come up with planning a dinner. But there are so many things going on in this church, and there seem to be so many loose veins that there was a conflict, and we had to give that up at the last minute. So there are people here thinking about change. It's not like we're all mindless sheep.
No, I'm sure that's true.
Okay.
Can I ask one last thing before? Go ahead. I'll close in just a second.
Okay.
Let's, I think, probably make this last.
Hi. I've had the great fortune of living abroad for 20 years. I'm from Oman, grew up here, and was raised in this church. And very focused on diversity and humanitarian projects. I helped build a hospital, helped orphanages, and my whole life purpose has been on uplifting people through coaching and having events and things like that. Very much a spiritual person, and it was a gift, I think, to be abroad during a lot of the political conflicts that have happened in our country. And as someone who doesn't like to be political at all, I chose to vote for the Republican Party. Not that I'm a lover of Trump or of anything like that. And I'm just very hopeful that this church can find a way to really focus on the spirituality and the unity of humanity, and on, not hating people or condemning them, but, how can we send love and light and unite and be a powerful force for good as a community. I have a 5-year-old who I'm bringing to this church now, and my son is 21 months, and I'd really like this to be a place that doesn't talk about condemning people, but is really focused on love and healing. Thank you.
I think we'll let you close from here.
So here's one thing that really needs to happen in this congregation for the next year. You all need to be in prayer for your leaders, for the task force, for the work that we're doing, because I think it's going to have to be a combination of coming from inside and outside. And so how you understand prayer or meditation in your life to be, I think it needs to be a sense of holding this church in the best light for this next 12 months as we work together, okay? Maybe you need to find small groups to get together to do that, or you do it on your own, but, you know, that's going to have to be crucial in the process. Thank you all for being here today. You were so great. You know, give yourselves an applause because you were all listening well and you wrote so many years, so thank you. And the church has my information, and if you have more questions, they're easy to find a way to get a hold of them, okay?
Well, thanks, Greg, and thanks to all of you for lingering and for your participation in the survey and for your very, very helpful thoughts and meditations as we continue to imagine our life together as we move forward. So thanks, everybody.